Want to know what we're all here for? Well, you better get hip to Podcast by George. Podcast by George. Podcast by George. He knows what he's fighting for. It's Podcast by George. Podcast by George. Want to know what we're fighting for?
Want to know what you're fighting for? Podcast by George. 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 Oh, yeah.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. Okay, did you hear that? That was the theme song from Ron Placone that we play sometimes on the show. But right at the end was the singing of the podcast by George Ron Placone theme song by a viewer's young daughters. He said they were running around the house singing that song. I said, well, God, hold your phone up, record it, and send it to me, and I'll play it on the podcast. So I just love that. Honest to God, let's hear it one more time.
For Podcast by George. 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 Oh, yeah.
God. I mean, is that any good? Oh, you gotta love that. Well, we're wrapping up 2020 in good cheer, at least starting this podcast in a happy way. We've got a serious topic or two to talk about today, and we're wrapping up 2020, of course. The 2020 world that we live in is still with us. COVID-19 is still out there. It's still killing people. The vaccine is on the way. We got to mask up. We got to stay home. We got to socially distance. We got to do what we got to do until we get this thing behind us, but that's not happening until well into 2021, and 2020 still leaves us with a world that can be destroyed by a nuclear missile strike fired from a submarine, even by mistake somewhere out there in the Arctic wilderness. In 20 minutes, we can be dead from that, and the climate scientists, of course, are telling us that on our current path and the accelerating path that we're on, we're all going to be dead in 20 years. Hell, maybe 20 months, maybe 20 weeks. I mean, we got to get a handle on climate or it's game over and everything else is irrelevant. But I wanted to, as we wind down the year here, hit on a couple of stories, one old and one relatively new, something that bears a little explanation, and another story that has kind of been overlooked, and it has to do with these two really big stories of Julian Assange still sitting in the Old Bailey out there waiting for a verdict on his extradition trial to send him back to the United States and face trial here for espionage or all kinds of goofy shit that might end up in his death, for God's sake. And the election just passed, and the 2020 Joe Biden, Donald Trump, pick'em election that we just had. It's pretty complex stuff on some levels, but on other levels, it's kind of simple. And I'm going to give you the simple version because I'm a simple guy, folks. I mean, that's what we're going to do today. So Assange, he sits out there in that jail. We've talked about that a little bit before. Why? He's in there for exposing war crimes by the United States and its allies. That's why Britain is holding him. That's why they're holding him for extradition, which isn't even legal, to the United States. Everybody thinks it's because of Hillary Clinton's emails or something that he did and people don't like him. Now, the real reason that they want him dead, hung by the neck, if they possibly can get it that way, is because he revealed those war crimes, particularly in the Iraq War and that Apache helicopter video that you can go to YouTube and see. And it killed 2 Reuters journalists on the ground and a bunch of innocent civilians. And it was one of these high-tech, supposedly, although it's really low-tech, video game killings that are so common in today's theaters of war. And Julian Assange revealed that, and they've been after him ever since. I'm not going to show you the video clip because I don't want the CIA sitting on my doorstep, folks, even though it's on YouTube. You can go out there and check it out. But so that's why the powers that be in government want Julian Assange. Why are journalists sitting there so silent? That's the other big question, and really, to me, is the more perplexing one. I get why the government wants him dead, because he exposed their war crimes. But why aren't the journalists running to his defense? My God, that Apache helicopter video included the killing of 2 Reuters journalists on the ground, part of the community. You think they would be supporting this guy every single day on their front pages and newscasts? But no. Not so much. Well, why is that? Well, number one reason, probably the big picture reason, is we're not getting the news, folks. People that you think are news reporters and television shows that you think are news shows, particularly on the evening cable cast, that is not news. Those people wouldn't know news if it jumped up and bit them in the ass. They're in the info entertainment business. And I'm talking about Fox News. I'm talking about MSNBC. I'm talking about CNN. I'm talking about any number of news outlets and personalities that you're well familiar with. And they kind of resent this kind of reporting, I think, at least to a certain extent, by Julian Assange, because this guy's a publisher. He got out the real news, life and death type stuff, war crimes, and they are not coming to his defense. He just sits in that jail cell, and the journalists in this country particularly sit silent. And why? Well, because American journalists, by and large, I hate to say this, hell, I got a journalism degree. I used to consider myself a journalist. They suck. Okay, so the other big question is, why doesn't Julian Assange get more support from politicians in this country? Well, with the notable exception of folks like Tulsi Gabbard, you hear me talk about her all the time, he's not getting any support by people even like AOC, for God's sake, the lead member of the squad, the big supporter of progressivism in the United States. She doesn't support Assange, she doesn't think. She's kind of confused about it. Well, why is that? Yeah, they're confused, all right. They're confused because Assange's other big crime politically was to reveal the inner workings of the DNC, the Democratic Party, in the 2016 election, and Bernie Sanders, and how he was being screwed mightily by Hillary Clinton, the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Neera Tanden, and those types of people. Well, Assange's reveal of those emails, which he didn't steal, by the way, those were delivered to him. A lot of people think they were hacked. There's a possibility of that, but I think the real thinking now is that those things were actually put on a thumb drive and handed to Assange, and he published them. And it revealed this horrific inner working of the DNC and how an American election basically was stolen by Hillary Clinton, taken away from Bernie Sanders. That's what's in those emails. They were working behind the scenes. The DNC was conspiring and trying to come up with strategies to defeat a guy they didn't consider to be a Democrat, Bernie Sanders, from the moment that he got into the election. And maybe most importantly, Hillary Clinton actually owned the DNC. And I don't just mean that in a non-literal sense. I mean literally. The DNC went bankrupt during the 2016 election, and Hillary Clinton bailed them out. Who do you think the Democratic National Committee is going to support? All Democrats equally and evenly, including Bernie Sanders, who is a part of the Democratic Party? No, they were all in for Hillary Clinton. That was revealed by Julian Assange. All right, so to summarize, that's why the government wants Assange, and that's why the DNC and the political system in the United States doesn't want him. I mean, they're not going to come up to his defense at all. Those are the two issues in play here. And don't get me wrong, I'm not the world's greatest Bernie supporter in some respects. I mean, he is better than the alternative, but like you've heard me say, we need major change. I mean, we need major change in this country. We just had a massive fail in the 2020 election with Joe Biden. My God, that is not what we need. Bernie was a little bit of a change, but he insisted on doing it from within the Democratic Party, where no major change is going to take place. That was on Bernie. And the best example of that, folks, is in 2016. Christopher Hedges, the Pulitzer Prize-winning writer, and he's formerly the New York Times and that type of thing, he wrote a big article. I'll put it up here on the screen. just so that you can get the headline and maybe a little bit of the gist of it. Chris Hedges said that Bernie cannot win in 2020. It's game over for him. And furthermore, if he persists in doing this, what he is going to do is delegitimize his movement and his support, because the DNC will not tolerate, they will not allow him to be elected in 2020. And Chris Hedges knew this, and he's not Bernie Sanders, but apparently Bernie didn't know it. And he insisted on running from within the Democratic Party again. And guess what happened? Oh, yeah, they screwed him again. And that brings us to the story that I wanted to highlight here, that I talked when I was saying at the beginning that it bears some further explanation, kind of has gotten overlooked, but it's a huge story because it gets right to the fundamental of the American political system, a presidential election, and maybe COVID-19 and the economic crisis that we're now facing and the bailouts that you're reading about. And it has to do with, believe it or not, maybe some folks have forgotten, I haven't, the Iowa caucuses. Here's a story that ran just a couple of weeks ago in Politico. I hope you saw this. I did. I put on Facebook. I kind of chuckled and laughed. I said, my God, I think Bernie should run as a Democrat again, because this shows how Bernie was screwed in the Iowa caucuses. To give you a little background, everybody knows what the Iowa caucuses are, first in the nation. People like Bernie Sanders tend to do extremely well in them because it's the kind of thing where people have to get together and actively support a candidate and say why they support a candidate. And I got news for you. Some of these people are kind of hard to defend. Joe Biden was a perfect example of this. But people like Bernie that are kind of policy-laden and have some really good ideas, they do really well in the Iowa caucuses. And Bernie had done well in the 2016 Iowa caucuses, or the caucuses for the 2016 election. And the DNC had pulled these shenanigans revealed by Assange to sink Bernie's candidacy for 2016. Well, they couldn't do that again in 2020. They'd been outed, basically, by Assange. Those kind of internal machinations, those kind of dirty trickster type things inside couldn't be done again. So if they wanted to block Bernie's path to the presidency, and he was rolling again towards the 2020 nomination, how are they going to stop that? Well, they kind of took what I call the gypsy approach. And it goes back to my days as a crime reporter. The police actually used to refer to it this way on the crime blotter, and I always thought it was kind of racist even, but they would refer to kind of like the a gypsy strategy, and it's very basic. What they would do is a group of people would go into like a store. One woman would start screaming and running around like her hair was on fire, basically, and confusion and chaos would break out, and then people that were with her would steal stuff. And sometimes the store would be completely unaware of it. And, and sometimes it took a long time to figure out what was happening. Okay. As that is the background, here come the Iowa caucuses. Everybody's all excited about it. Bernie Sanders has got the momentum again. He's having big rallies. It looks like he's finally going to overcome the problem of 2016, that he's going to be the nominee, that he's going to beat a weakened Donald Trump in 2020. The DNC ain't having any of that. So what do? They come up with this thing called a shadow app for the reporting of the Iowa caucuses, which screwed everything up. And through the winner of the caucuses in doubt, Pete Buttigieg was decided to be the winner of the Iowa caucuses, even though it was kind of thought that Bernie had won the actual voting in the Iowa caucuses. Let me read to you what was just reported this past couple of weeks. And it starts off with Iowa autopsy report. DNC meddling led to caucus debacle. Democratic National Committee meddling combined with missteps by the state Democratic Party here in Iowa were the primary drivers of the chaos that torpedoed the Iowa caucuses earlier this year, according to a new audit commissioned by the state party. And that's critical because, as I reported on my podcast previously, no one has ever won the presidency, or no one had ever won the presidency previously without winning either Iowa or New Hampshire. I knew that. The DNC knew that. Bernie was going to win New Hampshire because of his proximity to the state from his home state of Vermont. So he had to be stopped in Iowa. And again, they couldn't do it with the standard dirty tricks. They'd already been caught doing that. So they came up with this thing, this shadow app, which threw so much dust up in the air, caused so much chaos in the store that the gypsies, as the cops of my day used to call it, stole the Iowa caucuses. So let's turn back to this Politico article and read on. The February caucuses were overrun by foul-ups. The state party was unable to report a winner on caucus night. Remember that? The mobile app to report results failed to work for many precinct chairs. The backup telephone systems were jammed, and some precincts had initial reporting errors. The state party chair, Troy Price, resigned in the wake of the debacle, which put Iowa's status as the first in the nation nominating contest in serious jeopardy. So, folks, they not only screwed Bernie Sanders, they screwed the state of Iowa to a certain respect with this thing, but they did accomplish their ultimate goal, this chaos that they're talking about that prevented Bernie Sanders from steamrolling through the primary, beginning with the chaos of the Iowa caucus. The report pins the blame squarely on the DNC for the heart of the problem on caucus night, the delay in the reporting of the results. According to the report, the DNC demanded the technology company Shadow build a conversion tool just weeks, and that's key, just weeks before the caucuses, to allow the DNC to have real-time access to the raw numbers because the national party feared the app would miscalculate results. The DNC's data system used a different database format than Shadow's reporting app, which caused multiple problems. Okay, were they too dumb or were they in on it? Was that by accident or was that by design? Because we've been having these Iowa caucuses forever. I mean, they've gotten bigger, obviously, with this frenzy of political fervor around the country, but we're capable of conducting caucuses. We can get results on these things out. It isn't very complex. I mean, you count up the votes. The caucuses generally are small in many locations. You phone them into the headquarters. Somebody tabulates them. There's a paper trail. Everybody's accountable. Everybody's on deck with this thing. But the app eliminated all of that, and then everything went sideways with the Iowa caucuses, and after that, also Bernie's candidacy, if you'll recall. So, quote, attempting to graft an entirely new software element onto the back-end reporting system at the proverbial 11th hour is likely always going to be problematic, and it was ultimately the cause of a major problem on caucus night, the report concludes. Do you think anybody involved in IT or programming or coding or anything like that knows that's exactly right? I mean, you got to test and retest. You can't do it last minute. I mean, it's always going to fail, folks. Again, by accident or by design. Furthermore, the IDP, the Iowa Democratic Party, was not involved in the development of this tool. Why? Hell, they didn't need it. They probably didn't want it. But they got it, folks, and so did the rest of us, and particularly Bernie. He really got it. And again, bear in mind, I'm not the world's greatest Bernie supporter. I mean, I like the dude all right. I get it. I mean, he was the best that was out there probably, but there's a lot of flies on Bernie as well. So I'm not one of these Bernie, you got screwed. I'm not like that. That's not what I'm about. The IDP simply permitted the DNC to direct the IDP's vendor. So the IDP turned that over to the DNC, and you got to remember, what's the background? The DNC has been committed, proven by Julian Assange, to want to stop the candidacy of Bernie Sanders. And they developed this app. It came into play. All right, so this story is going to continue a little bit. Here's the conclusion of it. The audit states the conversion tool had coding errors that spit out inaccurate numbers and caused confusion about the accuracy of the results, eventually leading to delays in reporting. But the state's party app never malfunctioned nor was hacked. So let's look a little closer here before we wrap up on this Shadow app thing. And this really gets to the heart of what I'm talking about. Are they too dumb? Or are they in on it? This was an article that appeared in independent media, The Intercept, right after the Iowa caucuses. Democratic operative Tara McGowan is denying that her high-profile liberal firm Acronym played a role in the Monday evening caucus debacle, claiming that her firm was merely an investor in the company, Shadow Inc., which developed the app at the center of the controversy. But internal company documents, a source close to the firms, and public records show a close and intertwined relationship between Acronym and Shadow. In addition, ahead of the caucuses, questions swirled inside Shadow over the company's ability to deliver a quality product, and there was concern from at least one staff member that senior leaders of Shadow and Acronym, both of which were launched as a new Democratic bulwark against President Donald Trump, have been far from neutral in the Democratic primary. Yeah, that's a key line there, folks. Far from neutral in the Democratic primary. Again, kind of like the DNC in the 2016 election and their support of Hillary Clinton, their actual funding and being bought by Hillary Clinton, literally. I mean, I'm not just saying that. That's exactly what happened. They were bankrupt. She infused cash to keep the DNC out of bankruptcy. All right, so let's continue here. A person with knowledge of the company's culture who asked to remain anonymous for fear of reprisal shared communications showing that top officials of the company regularly expressed hostility to Senator Bernie Sanders supporters. Yeah. McGowan is married to Michael Hale, a senior strategist with the Buttigieg campaign. There is no evidence any preference of candidates had any effect on the coding issue that is stalling the Iowa results. Acronym launched with a promise to compete with the Trump campaign's strong emphasis on digital media, launching Democratic messages through paid advertisements on Facebook and other platforms. But the source said the company in many ways was woefully unprepared for the many challenges it had taken on, including the Iowa caucus app. A precinct captain for Sanders, who requested anonymity because they were not authorized to talk to the press, confirmed that the rollout was rushed. We didn't know about the app until like a month ago. We didn't have access to the app until like 3 days ago. Okay, this thing wasn't ready. I mean, it wasn't baked, but they rolled with it because they needed the confusion. They needed the chaos. They went with it anyway because Bernie, right up until the caucus, it looked like he was going to roll through it again, that he was going to come out as the winner on this thing. And bear in mind now, Trump's in the background. This is also key to this. There was real reason to believe that the Democratic nominee, almost whoever it was, and it actually was proven to be true because they picked the weakest ding-dong they could in Joe Biden, was going to win. So the DNC, the donors, and all those people, they're looking at this and saying, oh my God, Bernie Sanders? I mean, is he going to roll through this thing? Is he going to, if we allow him to win the Democratic nomination, is this guy going to beat Donald Trump, this Democratic socialist, and come to power and give people free education, give people Medicare for all of these things that strike at the very heart of American capitalism? Hell, nobody will go to work tomorrow. I mean, I think that's what they're thinking. This app has never been used in any real election or tested at a statewide scale, and it's only been contemplated for use for 2 months now. David Jefferson, who also served on the board of Verified Voting, a nonpartisan election integrity organization, told the New York Times. Again, this is right after the debacle of the Iowa caucuses. Okay, so this next part is key. This next page, it reads, federal campaign finance records show that the Iowa Democratic Party and the Nevada Democratic Party retained Shadow to develop its caucus app. We know that now. Shadow has also been retained for digital services by Buttigieg's campaign. Yeah, I mean, you can't get away from this because who was the guy that was declared the winner because of the screw-up in the Iowa caucuses? Pete Buttigieg. And it was Bizarroville. I flash back a little bit. Check out this video. I want to put this up. I've got this in my files here. This is Pete Buttigieg. He declared victory with what, like 20 or 30% of the vote in? I mean, if it was even that from the Iowa caucuses. And even his supporters were going, well, what the hell? Where's he getting this from? How's he able to do that? Well, was he too dumb or was he in on it? And it's evidenced by this video where he's asked about declaring victory, and he refuses to answer questions from reporters. And it's really strange because what's the one thing that you do if somebody puts a camera in your face? If you have the opportunity in an early stage of an election like this to say anything, man, you stop, you turn, you answer questions, you take all the prime time you can get. Who taught us that? the orange man, Donald Trump. And watch Buttigieg's reaction to being asked about this screwed up return in the Iowa caucuses and his declaration of victory with virtually no results in. Watch this.
Was it premature to declare a victory?
How do you feel about Iowa?
How do you feel?
You said victorious last night. Do you think that's too early, or you feel like your numbers are going well?
Well, to pick the article back up, it says Shadow had been retained for digital services by Buttigieg's campaign, which paid the company $42,500 for software-related services last July, when this was written, and by Joe Biden's campaign, which paid Shadow $1,225 for text messaging services last July as well. Well, those aren't big amounts of money, obviously, but it shows that these people were in on it, at least to that level. Shadow was launched by former staffers to Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign, including Nimira Krista Davis, Anna Arreo, and James Hickey. According to professional biographies listed on LinkedIn, Shadow did not respond to a request for comment. Okay, that always, being a journalist from back in the day, that always makes me suspicious. Anytime somebody's not commenting, anytime somebody refuses to go on the record, your antenna should be going up. You should be getting instantly suspicious. Reminds me of Vincent Bugliosi, the guy that convicted Charlie Manson. He says, not everybody that takes a polygraph is guilty, but everybody that refuses to pretty much is. Acronym, which includes a hybrid model of a 501c4 entity that does not disclose donors and a super PAC that does, has been a favorite for deep-pocketed Democratic donors. Donald Sussman, the founder of Paloma Partners, and Michael Moritz, a partner at Sequoia Capital, each donated $1 million to Acronym last year. Filmmaker Steven Spielberg gave $500,000. Investor Seth Klarman, once a major donor to Republican caucuses, gave $1.5 million to Acronym. Okay, those are all big money guys. I don't think they're dumb, but they obviously were in on it. But my God, do you think that they were giving all of this money for the development of a company that produced the Shadow app thing that wouldn't even work? I think it actually did work. I think it worked exactly as designed. Acronym appears to have deleted portions of its website showcasing its involvement in Shadow. They don't want to take any credit for this thing. They don't want to be tarred with that brush. Acronym is thrilled to announce the launch of Shadow, a new technology company that will exist under the Acronym umbrella and build accessible technological infrastructure and tools to enable campaigns to better harness, integrate, and manage data across the platforms and technologies they all use. Boy, I'm from down home, folks. I'm from the farm. That is some stupendously worded bullshit right there. Holy cow. All right, so let's wrap this up. What I want to do here is show the guy that wrote this article, because he's doing some great work, this guy. His name's Lee Fong. And this is the headline again to show that from February 4th. Of 2020, The Intercept, and an article by Lee Fong that kind of brings this stuff all together. And again, complex, maybe simple when you think of it simply, and I think of it very simply because, again, I'm just a simple man. I mean, they could have been the name of this podcast, but it is Podcast by George, and I want to wrap it up again with these two little girls. Honest to God, I love this. I don't normally do this. I don't end with the theme song. We started with it, but we're going to wrap it up here very quickly. And if you like this, if you like Podcast by George, go to podcastbygeorge.com. Click on the platform, a little badge icon there that you would like to subscribe to us on, and you'll get each and every one of these as we roll into the new year, wrap up 2020 with better and brighter and happier days ahead, hopefully, in 2021. Take it, girls. Here we go.
Want to know what you're fighting for? Podcast by George. Podcast by George. Podcast by George! Podcast by George! Podcast by George! Oh, yeah!